All right, guys, it's good to be back. Just a quick show today. I know we're a little bit late in the evening, and I know also this is a pretty crazy topic for you guys. Probably don't even know what I'm talking about here when I say this is a very strange title, 5+ levels of density. Um, One second, just gonna put this stuff on Twitter. Just gonna put this on Twitter. All right. Let's roll. All right. Well, first things first, we got the wine for tonight. Those of you who joined us earlier maybe already saw it, but c'est Côte Bruy. So Bruy is one of the crews in Beaujolais, and I told you that we were going to be going through all of these. Côte Bruy is not a really as well known one as Bruy, and if you recall from the map last time we showed Beaujolais, the crews are in the northern part of Beaujolais. So you have Beaujolais, which is right down the Rhone Valley, right? Upper part of the Rhone Valley, just south of Lyon, where the Rhone and the Saône meet together. You go south of that, you have Beaujolais. Within the whole region of Beaujolais, which is between the Rhone River and the Central Massif, you have in the lower half flat ground, Beaujolais, standard Beaujolais, more simple. Then you have Beaujolais Village. These are on hilly areas, different aspects. Within the village, you have these particular villages, right, that are of higher quality. And there's a lot of different ones, and we're going to tackle them one after another. Fleury, Bruy, Morgon. There's a lot of them. But there's also Côte de Bruy, which is, I think, often looped in with Bruy, but it's its own little appellation. So I'll tell you a little bit about this producer, Jean-Claude Lapalou. I used to sell his wine. I've been to his estate. It's really beautiful area, and he's a really phenomenal winemaker. His stuff in particular is really popular in the Parisian wine bars. So if you ever get to Paris and you go to a hipster wine bar in Paris, you're probably going to find some Lapalou there. He's very, very popular with that crowd. He's even got a little van that drives up into Paris and brings stuff around. This is my last bottle of his, so I'm excited to be drinking it. And while it took a moment to open up, it's actually showing pretty nicely. It's totally stable. It's a 2013. It's a long time for a Beaujolais cru. This is almost a decade. It's 9 years now since this bottle, and you don't normally want to age Beaujolais that long, even the crus, and yet it's doing really well. So the difference between the Beaujolais cru and the regular Beaujolais is that you can expect with a regular Beaujolais to have a really bright and fruity flavor on it. And while on a Beaujolais cru, it's not that you won't get that. It won't be usually as bright, and there's more of a seriousness to it. So for instance, and there's a certain smell to Lapalou's wine in particular that it's hard to describe, but I think you could call it God, I'm trying to think of the words for how to describe it. It's just its own thing. Let me see if I can pick it out. It's almost like a slate. The thing is, usually with slate or like granite, and by the way, his wine is on granite. This stony, this flintiness, which you usually get with a white wine, but yet you're getting it with a red. And I think that's what's so really difficult to describe about it. It's a very solid texture in the wine, very solid texture. Like it feels firm, so to speak. You get red fruits, you get raspberries. It's really phenomenal stuff. I mean, I really endorse his wines here, but there's a heft to it, and sometimes you get like a meatiness with these crus. I'm not really getting much of a meatiness right now. It's just this kind of, it is like a stone, you know. It's just like a stony, flinty, maybe even chalky kind of texture to it, texture and flavor that goes with the red fruit, and it's really distinct. And you get this in Beaujolais cru. You really get it with Lapalou. Ben, cheers to you. Cheers to you, my man. All right. So, with all that said, let's get into the topics here. So, I have two questions I'm going to address at the end, but what I really wanted to tackle was this concept of densities. So, a lot of you guys who follow me know that we also talk about esoteric stuff sometimes. This is going to be one of those topics, and you probably heard of the terms 3D, 4D, 5D being thrown around. I've used them before. You've heard about consciousness. We've talked about consciousness, but I want to put this in a bigger paradigm so you guys can sort of understand how it all works in the whole cycle of the universe, the whole cycle of life. And of course, maybe this doesn't resonate with you. Maybe you don't like it. Maybe you don't agree. It's fine, but I'm going to pose it anyway. So let's start with what a lot of you probably already know, having heard these terms 3D, 4D, 5D. So really, really quick precursor. 3D is this sort of low level consciousness that we talk about with humans, where it's, you know, you have something, I want it. I'm better than you, you're worse than me. Very hierarchical, very fear consciousness, power consciousness, and just low level stuff. A lot of games and crap. Go on. I'm trying to go through this quickly. And then, we've talked about how you move to 4D, and 4D is when you start to move from fear into courage. And then as you go through it, there's more and more agency. And while there's still this like objective of mastery, it becomes less of a, I need to dominate everybody else around me. You're not, you start to become more and more fearless, and you start to live life just for the sake of, pursuit of knowledge, um, pursuit of expansion. And then you get to 5D. It's a very, very difficult jump. When you get to 5D, you actually give up a lot of interest in the material, and you're really focused on love and connection. And of course, understanding that, so, the big differences, I guess you can say, is fear to courage, and then courage to love and surrender, right? So fear and power to courage and knowledge to love and surrender. Like that's kind of the trajectory of it. When you're in 5D, you really let go of attachment to things that happen, and you see the oneness in everybody. So polarity starts to break down. You no longer start to view yourself in opposition to other people. Okay. And so when we talk about things going on the planet right now, we talk about this shift from 3D to 4D to 5D. And 4D is very often talked about as this bridge between 3D and 5D, right? Now, I don't want to confuse people. And by the way, JCR, cheers to you. It's good to have you on here. It's good that I'm happy you caught it. I'm happy you got yourself a little vino as well. So my intention here is not to confuse people, because this is a different modality, and some of it is going to be a little bit um, throw people off a bit. But I'm going to do it anyway because, and I'll explain why. So when we talk about 3D, 4D, 5D, this is relevant to us to have it broken down in the structure, because we are trying to navigate it personally, right? We are personally navigating this experience of moving through these stages of consciousness. So it's convenient to see them in three different dimensions. The other modality, however, to look at all this stuff is in density. Okay. And so when we talk about density, which is how you would describe the overall energetic of the population of the people, or the planet itself, let's put it that way, because you would define it by what the highest sort of level of life on the planet would be, what kind of planet it would be. You have densities, right? And so in this modality, we would be moving from third density to fourth density. Okay. No, Ben, it's not the same as the 5 tiers of women. Not the same as the 5 tiers of women. So we'd be moving from a third density to fourth density. Okay. And the difference here is that in that modality, 3D and 4D would both be third density, and 5D would be fourth density, right? Really stupid terminology. I wish that people had thought this through before they started to use it. But I want to explain this stuff. I want to explain how it is, okay? Because if you think of third density to fourth density, okay, so you understand it in that sense that third density is about is polarity. Third density is polarity. Let's put it that way. Because even when you're 4D, right? Even when you're 4D and you're in courage, you're still in polarity. There's still a sense of maybe you're a little less attached to it. Maybe you're breaking through free a bit, but you're still in this I'm separate from others. Um, even when you're in knowledge trying to understand the world, which there's still a sense that those things are separate from you. You're analyzing and understanding them. They're objects. You're the subject, they're the object. Everything in 3 and 4D is about polarity. It's only when you get to 5D or fourth density that this changes. Again, I apologize for the fucking terminology. I don't like it myself, but so this begs the question, if third density is this polarity, what is first and second density? What is the sort of distinguishing factors between all these things? So I'm going to explain this stuff to you. And it's more just a curiosity for yourself to really understand it. So we would say 3D is lower third density and 4D is higher upper four density, right? Upper third density, right? 4D is upper third density, 3D is lower third density, but they're all third density, they're all in polarity. Second density would be what we would call animal life. Okay. Um, because when you're at the consciousness of an animal, then you don't have a sense of polarity or a sense of ego that I'm this and they're that. Like I have to be a certain way. I have to look to myself and take care of myself. There's a much more unconscious aspect to animals and how they interact with things, how they interact. Not just even animals. I think I would broaden it out and describe it as most of life in general, if not all of life. I mean, I don't want to get too much in the weeds with this about where you draw the line with things like bacteria, but I would put animals at the upper end of second density and lower forms of life at the bottom end of second density. Because in all of these cases, they are um, they are simply they're alive. They have some sort of program in terms of how they operate, but there isn't like an individualized sense of self. When we look at animals, right? Certain animals, certain pets like dogs, cats, maybe like a great like predators in particular, these single like lions and more advanced mammalian predators, not simply mammalian, you could say dolphins and you could say eagles, animals that as humans we intuitively recognize as being superior, like species, so to speak. We'll look at that and we'll say, I want the courage of a lion, or I want the ferocity. There's a connection between a human with a bear or with a lion or with an eagle, a wolf. Okay, there's a reason for that because we intuitively recognize them as the highest consciousness of animals to the extent that we can almost start to have a relationship with the animal itself as an individual in some cases. A lot of animals being exposed to humans has led to the animals themselves raising their consciousness further. So you see that even as our consciousness expands, the consciousness of the animals also expands. right? The whole planet moves up together. And so you start to see this stuff that we really recognize these great animals. So that's second density. So you can see you have lower second density is like insects, and lower than that, like maybe microscopic life would also fall into that place. And then you have predators, not just predators, but increasingly higher levels of aware animals are upper second density creatures. Okay. So what's first density? You can take a guess and figure out what first density is. First density would be in what we would call inanimate matter. Okay? Because remember, everything everything is energy. Everything is energy in the universe. And so matter is an illusion. It's an illusion. Um, we can detect electrical signatures in plants. We don't think plants are a lot, we don't think plants have consciousness, but they do have consciousness. Well, there's also it's a different thing. Obviously, I'm not claiming that um, rocks and stuff are alive in the sense. Well, plants would be somewhere within the midst of second density. And by the way, I just want to say I'm not I'm trying to give you guys just an idea of a way to think about things. A great tree, like you can feel that certain trees have more life to them than other trees. You might feel a certain connection with the tree. You might feel that, yeah, you might feel like this is a really great tree, especially a tree that's lived a long time, has more life to it. You could say that within that um, genetic lineage, that plant was reaching a higher level of consciousness, so to speak, right? It has more energy to it than another smaller plant, than a blade of grass. Okay, it's the same thing, by the way, among humans. People don't want to admit it, but some humans are great and they have an enormous amount of energy to them, and they make an enormous impact on their surroundings. And other ones are do pretty much nothing. They're they're pretty expendable at the end of the day. I mean, they don't make much of an impact on the world. Sad truth, not popular to say today. A lot of people don't make any impact on the world. Some people make massive impacts on the world. It's the same thing that you would notice one tree makes a big impact on the forest, other trees don't. It's the same deal. As above, so below. Okay, so let's continue with this. First density is more like rocks and inanimate matter because there is still an energy to it. It's just very, very subtle. And you could say at that level, so maybe it's not until um is there, and this is you get into some serious questions here about the individualized, when does a creature get a soul? And my contention would be that a soul itself is something that comes with higher states of consciousness, higher states of higher densities, right? And a soul is not um it it's such a difficult thing to talk about. Let's just stick to this and say that there is energy even to inanimate matter that's within it, potential energy, and there's a structure to it. So you look at rocks, you can see certain rocks have certain forms of matter have certain characteristics and are maybe more special than others. And then you have, of course, crystals, and crystals and the crystalline structure is a really, really big conductor of energy. And so you could say that a first density planet is just going to be inanimate matter, right? The second density planet is going to be some variation depending on how far along its cycle. It's going to be plant or animal life only. And then you go to a third density planet and you get conscious human life, but what we would call relatively primitive. Because basically, up until, at least for our understanding, up until Jesus, there was no fifth fourth density, fifth dimensional creature entity that came to this planet that started to shift the consciousness rapidly. The best people, the most wise people in the ancient world were at the very upper end of 4D, aka upper third density. Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, these wise thinkers. You could say Alexander the Great, right? Brave, fearless. They weren't in, love and light, though. They weren't in love and light. They were about knowledge and killing, but they had a higher level of doing it versus necessarily malice. There was spirit to them, and that's why they would tell men to basically aspire to become upper third density. But now we're in a different era, and we're breaking out. So in a fourth density planet, you have individuals who are still in physical form. And by the way, cheers, Tony. You came on a weird one. This is a weird show. We're doing a weird one today, but I wanted to address this topic. It's been on my mind for a while. So, fourth density is when we understand that we're all connected, and there's no longer this there's no longer this desire to try to control or dominate the other person, because we understand that we're one. By the way, I don't want this to come across in a weak kind of limp dick way, because it doesn't mean that you're not able or willing to fight. It just means that your whole approach to it is completely different. So there would not be wisdom to war, but you would know how to defend yourself, nevertheless, against ones who wanted to use it against you, because you always need to be able to protect yourself. The catch, of course, is that if a being was trying to attack you, or they were of a lower consciousness, you would presumably have the tools available to be able to defeat them, because you'd have a higher awareness and a higher ability to draw things in. Okay, but anyway, the important thing to understand about fourth density is at that point, you are what we would call in our terms today enlightened. However, you are still in physical form. You still have a physical body. You're not leaving your physical body behind. You live in a physical body, yet you understand the connection between different people, right? And that you no longer have this fear or need to control or dominate, because you can frankly get what you want anyway. You're happy, you're content, and um, you know, it's a different perspective. It's a different perspective. It's where we're moving, and you can expand. You can be expansive and grow without um, without any sort of sense of lack in the process. So you might ask what comes after that. And after fourth density is when we get to fifth density, and fifth density is when you leave your body. That's when you leave your physical body. You have what's called a light body. And so if you get into the esoterics of planet Earth, you start to understand that, and this has happened in other systems as well, but that we descended from source, which is very much high up, and then we go down through this descent, we go through this descent of consciousness, right? Collapse, 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 until we get all the way down to third density. Third density is the lowest point where you have conscious awareness, right? And so having to go all the way down and even further and then go back up. Third density is the lowest area that you have awareness of the self. After that, you completely lose awareness of the self in a different sense than when you're in the higher densities, when you actually are connected. Like, you maybe lose awareness of the self because you see how you're connected to other things. It's very interesting. So yeah, you're light body at fifth density. But beyond that stuff, I mean, then we start to get in the weird shit. And probably I can't even do it justice because I don't understand it. Haven't experienced it, have a hard time conceiving of it. But you start to get in more of like a quantum existence. So if you were in sixth density, then you would basically exists in you could materialize in a place, but you wouldn't necessarily be there. If you wanted to materialize, you could materialize, but you wouldn't necessarily be there because you'd be more in a quantum field. And then after that, of course, you're at, you know, God, source, confidence, consciousness itself, seventh density. Anyway, guys, that's that kind of crazy stuff. Prolific University, as you say, at Latian priest class was there. Yep, yep. It's if you get into all this stuff and you understand about Atlantis and Lemuria, you understand that this planet's been through a couple different cycles, and it remains to be seen. Are we going to break out of this cycle? I feel pretty confident we are going to break out of it. All right, now changing tacks back to the normal stuff that we talk about here. I got 2 questions here to answer on dating and relationships. So let's hit these up. Hey, Pat, I wanted to start out by thanking you for answering my DMs for the time I followed you. I've definitely gotten a lot of value out of you in both relationships and COVID cabal stuff. I also wanted to preface by saying, if you feel like one of your products would help me with this problem, totally feel free to suggest it. That being said, I was just rejected by a girl last week after a few dates, and it was very disappointing. Despite knowing that I was happy before I met her and will be happy after I'm done with her, it still made me freeze in a narcissistic way. I have been hooking up with girls left and right these last several months. It's not like I'm desperate or anything. I listened to a podcast recently about narcissism, and I feel like it fits me to a T. I totally overthink and freak out. So knowing that I'm only killing attraction by doing so, I still can't help myself from being impatient and double texting, etc., trying to get answers from a girl. I've done this several times before in my past, and like I said, I know it doesn't do anything, and I can't help myself from doing it because the overthinking is too much, and I completely freeze and can't focus on anything else. So, like at this point, I'm okay with it. It was a week ago. I'm kind of over it, but I'm just want some sort of help here and how to stop these type of anxiety things from coming out or how to deal with them better, because knowing that it doesn't help me is just isn't cutting it. I have been searching over the internet too. I hope that explains well enough. Okay, so here are the 2 really quick things to understand about anxiety. I mean, first off, and I told the guy in the DMs, but I'll just say this. If you've got a problem with anxiety like this, advice is cheap because you need somebody who's going to work through it with you. It's really a process of helping to move and shift energy in you, shift beliefs in you. Information, as a rule, will never fix anxiety. Okay. Now, if you can get somebody into the right state and then have an idea slip in, which is what I do with clients, then that can shift the belief structure. But the reality is that that same idea, if it's just kind of like if you read it or whatever, it's not going to slot in. And so what tends to happen, and I've been there, is that you go through this sort of foraging thing. Like, you got to get more information. If I find more information, then I'm going to be less anxious. So I got to go find that information. And then you get the information. It doesn't make you less anxious. You just want to get more information. Okay. So all this said, I don't think you're a narcissist. I don't know. I listened to a podcast recently about narcissism, and I feel like this fits me to a T. It doesn't fit you to a T. A narcissist would never ask this question. A narcissist would never ask the question that you just asked. Okay, so you're not a narcissist. Don't worry about that. It's just anxious attachment stuff. All right? It's anxious attachment stuff. You ping to a girl because if you meet a girl who makes you feel a certain way, gives you a certain amount of investment, then you get latched onto her and you start to, the reality is that it is kind of like if they were a caregiver, a provider, really, like if they were your parents, and you don't want them to go away. And so you keep basically pinging them for reassurance, which is why you're double texting. You almost feel like you can't help it. You might know logically that it's not a good idea, but it's really torture for you to deal with it. So what do you do? I mean, what do you do with the situation? How do you handle this stuff? Well, like I said, going through it with someone is really helpful, having like a coach or a practitioner to work through it with. However, um, here's a couple of practical tips. So if you're feeling anxious and you feel like you need to say something to a girl, then write out what you're going to say to her, but don't send it to her. Okay, you have a bunch of feelings, write it out, but don't send it to her. Um, that can make a really, really big difference. When I felt like I really needed to say something to somebody and I was feeling anxious about it, I've written out, and I don't mean like you have to take it seriously. Like sometimes in certain emotional cases, I had written out very, very long, edited like letters to that person. And then I never sent them. I think there's also value in printing them out and burning them because you kind of burn off the energy from it. Literally burns it up. That's a strategy to do it. However, on a deeper level, what kind of girl are you hitting these patterns with? The reality about anxious attachment is that it gets exacerbated by certain women that you're pinging yourself onto. And so is this girl, right? What was it about her that made you ping onto her so much? Understanding it's not about her saying like, "Oh, there'll be other ones out there." It's a matter of understanding, is this girl particularly special in some way? What about this girl made me really fixate on her? So you can understand yourself from the process. And look, if she really is a good girl, if there really is some potential here, like, and she's not doing things to try to toy with you and mess with you, honestly, it can be worth saying something. Now, I know that's anti-game stuff, and there's a good chance, if this girl is playing games and you tell her that, if you and you tell her that, some of your anxiety around this stuff, then she'll probably leave. Yeah, she'll probably leave. But if you establish something, if something's good with the girl, then there's actually a level of trust, then you can have those kind of conversations. And the reality is that anxious attachment people tend to only get rid of their anxious attachment romantically if they're with somebody who's more securely attached. I mean, obviously, you can work on a lot of this yourself and move the needle. It's not like black and white, you're in anxious attached or you're not. It's a spectrum. But use the situation with this girl to figure out exactly what was it about her, what did she do that made you ping onto her so much. So, and yeah, hooking up with girls doesn't make a big difference because the way that the game works is that if you're hooking up with a girl, you can kind of keep her at arm's length, like casual hookup, whatever. You don't have to see her after that. So you can seduce her, and then if you don't let her get close to you, then it's no problem. It's when you let a girl get close to you that things start to have, become an issue. So stop worrying about killing the attraction so much. I mean, if you're able to get girls, um, let me see here for a second. I just want to make sure I'm reading the rest of this statement correctly. Yeah, I guess I'll just call it right there because I don't know exactly what happened after those dates. Um, sounds like probably you came on too strong, but I would like to know kind of more about the dates. Anyway, I think I explained it pretty much as well as I can explain it under the circumstances with anxiety. But the big thing is that you need to work through anxiety with somebody. You can't really do it completely on your own because anxiety in this context is fundamentally about, it's exposure therapy. So having these situations with women that trigger it is important for you to move through it, but you have to be able to process it correctly. Otherwise, you get re-triggered and re-traumatized, but you don't shift the energy and it just happens over and over and over again. And you will keep doing that until you manage to work through it. So, anyway. All right. last question here, unless you guys throw some crap in the chat. Hey, Pat, I had a follow-up question to the in-depth answer you gave on over pursuing you gave the other day. Thanks for that. Okay. I want to lay out my particular context for you. This is a gym girl I had written about last summer. Some of you guys might remember this. This is way long, bunch of shows back. To remind you briefly, when I first asked her out, it was in person at the gym, and we made loose plans to grab a drink. It was hard in the moment to solidify a time because coworkers were around. So when I handled it in the DMs later and told her the place we should go to, she responded with suggesting something completely different than getting drinks. I immediately got in my head with all of this Red Bull BS, thinking she was testing me. So my response to that was I told her to send me her number. That's when things started getting dicey. She started messing with me, asking what was in it for her to give me her number, and asked me what my number was. She said she could sense my incongruence. I ended up leaving her on red out of fear I was losing frame. I tried again in person a couple weeks later, but kind of forced it, and she gave me a wishy-washy answer. When I look back on it, I don't think I had built enough comfort. There was a major downside on her end to risk getting a drink with some guy at the gym. What if it didn't go well? She'd have to see me all the time, etc. Her coworkers were also already starting to crack jokes about us. These were all things I never really considered. I feel her counter plan wasn't so much a test, but a safer way for her to test the waters of us hanging out, and I completely disregarded that. She is also younger, like you predicted. After all of this particular gym's chain location had closed down, and I didn't see her for a few months. I re-engaged through DMs over the holidays and got some great responses. I fumbled a bit, but nothing awful. I overly teased her, and I was left undelivered. I bought your texting guide after this. Haha. Buy Tackling Texting. Buy it on Amazon. Tackling Texting. Fast forward to this month. By the way, also my new book, 3 Pillars of Attraction, coming out very soon. Tomorrow. Fast forward this month, she saw me for the first time in 4 months at our new gym, and her eyes lit up. She asked me if I missed her, and I broke the touch barrier and gave her a hug and said, and this time I was back in my frame and I was able to turn around on her, telling her apparently she missed me by following me to the new gym. Since all of this, she has a totally different energy about her with me. Heavy eye contact, waves to me when I walk in, flirty, etc. It's confirming to me the old context she didn't feel safe in, and now that we are in a new environment, I want to try once more. How should I play this? Should I start engaging with her stories since she watches mine? Should I let synchronicity do its thing and attack it in person? Or should I handle it in the DMs, where it is more comfortable, even though I'd be double texting at this point? Sorry this is long, but I feel very drawn to this one, and the energy feels like the rules are meant to be broken in this case. Well, all right. Let me reframe the question. You know, you went through this whole thing talking about how you overgamed, you got in your head with all this pill BS, and you accurately understood that you that there was an issue with comfort for her, and that comfort, that lack of comfort, basically blocked the situation, right? That lack of comfort made her pull back, which, by the way, technically that's a comfort test. So it is a test. It's just a different test than the red pill guys will tell you. She's looking for some level of reassurance from you, and you overgamed. So my question to you is, why now, after you've done this twice, did a little bit in the DMs in December over the holidays, why would you do it again? I mean, I hate to be what's the word? Look, just be normal, be natural, right? I mean, she's giving you heavy signals and you're trying to think how you should play this. You don't need to think about how you should play it. You need to just be, you just need to, like, just ask her out. Say, hey, like, why don't we go grab drinks this weekend? If she says no, you just laugh at her, you know, say, okay. But don't be weird. Don't try to do all this sort of gamey stuff. Like, this is a situation where you're still in the mindset and you're at risk of over gaming by making statements that, trying to push her away more so that you seem more desirable. She's in the zone right now. At this point, just the fact that you've been in touch all this time and the fact that you ended up being at the same gym again, that's massive synchronicity. That makes a girl feel very, very much drawn to you just by the nature of it. It's kind of like their little magic thing, like, oh my God, he's here again. Maybe it's meant to be. Also, there's just some different dynamics in the location than before. Maybe people were putting too much pressure on her before, and the way you came across, she didn't feel comfortable. Everything's reset now. It really is not that complicated. She's interested. When a girl's interested, you ask her out. Okay, you move things forward. Um, she watches your stories. I mean, there's just so much confirmation here. I would just, I would totally ask her in person and just say, "Hey, what are you doing this weekend?" She's like, "Well, I don't know. Got this thing." Why? Because I like, let's go get some drinks on Friday. Like, you can say it just like that. You don't have to make it a formal, heavy date, although it's obviously implied it's a date. But just assume the rapport at this point. You have so much rapport anyway, it's easy to assume. So, anyway, all right, let me answer these questions in the chat. 222 portal lead to Putin. Look, we will talk about that stuff here. You can ask on the other kind of show. But yeah, that was a big portal, the 222 portal. 222 portal. All right, Ben Fath. I did the whole anxious attachment thing way back in the day. Went away after I dated an honest girl for once. Made me realize the girls I used to lose my shit over weren't shit. 100%. 100%. We get caught in this cycle when we're anxious and then we date anxious girls and it burns real hot and then somebody gets fucked over every single time and it happens within 3 months. Really immature kind of scenario. Okay, just in response to this last question we had though. Hey Pat, it's hard to ask in person because of where she usually is at, i.e. front desk. Well, then ask her over DMs. What I'm just trying to make a point of is that ask her very casually what she's up to over the weekend, and then you invite her out. That's what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that she's in the zone. You don't need to warm her up anymore. If you feel like that's more efficient or if that's a better place, then do it. I don't think it matters. I think all that matters is that you do it. Yeah, that doesn't matter if you double text her at this point. It doesn't matter. That stuff's noise. When a girl's giving you that many signals, unless you sent some like massive wall of text, like asking her questions and stuff like that, and she didn't answer it, I wouldn't be concerned about that kind of stuff. JCR, how do you respond? No problem, brother. No problem. How do you respond when friends start waking up? It's inevitably a delusion of bullshit, but I want to be encouraging. Before, I've generally been smile and nod, hint when necessary. Well, look, again, slightly different topic, but I think this one's broad enough that we can talk about it. Because you can be red pilled about all sorts of stuff, right? Look, when people are waking up, if you want people to wake up, people are going to wake up when they're going to wake up. And the reality is that if they take too long, it's going to be pretty bad for them. If people aren't able to see the light, they're going to suffer the consequences of it. That's just the reality of the situation. What you can do is be different. But when I say be different, it's not just be different and think different, have different perspectives. It's that energetically you need to be different. You need to feel different to be around. And one of the really difficult things, I would say it's probably our biggest barrier as awake individuals, is making sure that we don't get we don't start like sniffing our own shit. Like, oh, we're awake and you're not. Because while it's understandable, and look, I can tell you with all this war stuff, I mean, with the amount of propaganda, I'm fucking have had it up to here with it. I mean, the fact that people are still falling for this shit really does at times make me want to bang my head against the wall. It makes me want to jump out a window. I mean, it's so fucking obvious at this point. People still falling for it. But at the end of the day, that is me being trapped in polarity, that like I'm right and they're wrong. And look, it doesn't mean that I'm trying to, with this statement, deconstruct things. Doesn't mean I'm trying to say, well, there is no right, there is no wrong. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that the attachment to being right is the issue. If you are right, if you understand what's going on and you're at peace with it, and you can be, just by your very nature, a positive, confident rock in the storm, you can chart a way forward. In time, people will be drawn towards you. We are still in the collapse phase, and we're now in the heavy part of the collapse. The charges, the demolition charges are going off. And really, at this juncture, things are going to get they're going to get really crazy for the people who just aren't awake and aren't going to, they don't, all you can do is be there for them. And if there's somebody who's very, very close to you, if they're in a parent, spouse, child capacity, maybe you have some tactical leeway to be forceful on certain issues, on the issue that was facing us more last year. I think that there was some leeway to be pretty firm about your position on that, because that was a life and death thing in many cases. But point is, you cannot save them. You cannot save them. Trying to save them takes you out of your own sovereignty. All you can do is be a light and show them love in spite of their foolishness. If you keep your ego low in that sense, they're much more likely to turn to you when they no longer have firm ground to stand on. So just hit these comments right here. Uncle Guns responding to the last big question, asking her questions, how she's doing, how's your day, weekend, etc. What do you want, where to go, not being different. She's heard all that before. Yep. Totally right. Small talk is always terrible stuff, guys. Just never ever want to do small talk. Remember, if you ask a question like how was your weekend, you're taking energy from a girl. You're taking energy from a girl. That's what you're doing. Because you're making her respond to something that she doesn't give a fuck about responding to, and that you don't give a fuck about the answer to. You are just simply you're just simply trying to contact her so that you guys are in contact. It's the subtext of we're in communication with each other, right? A lot of immature, anxious girls will text you all throughout the day, and they get upset if you don't respond. They text you about nonsense, and that's bad if you're an attractive girl. But if you're a guy doing that, get the fuck out of here. Yep, man. My book has it all. Tackling Texting has it all. Media texts are the big stuff. They make it so much easier. So much easier. Using photos, using video, using voice notes, using all that kind of stuff. anything to make it more casual, to spice it up, change the energy. But anyway, guys, I'm getting really tired. I got to wake up early. Just wanted to get this one in. I appreciate you guys coming on. So, so yeah, as JCR says here, women like women don't like men who have nothing to say. Better not to text at all. Exactly. If you're not adding value, don't text. Anyway, guys, we'll see you next show. Appreciate you all. Much love.